Hi, this is Karen Presbyterian, and you're listening to the SAP Security and GRC podcast, helping you in your journey to effective access risk management in SAP. In today's episode, we will be discussing the security risks and opportunities of S4HANA transformations. Our host for today is Emile Steyn, and he'll be joined by industry expert Marco Hammel from NoMonkey. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Before we delve into the topic for today, I'm going to give Marco just an opportunity to introduce himself and tell us a bit about himself.
Thanks, Emile, and thanks for the invitation to be part of the show. So Marco, I'm co-founder and managing director of NoMonkey. So I'm in the SAP space and the security space, like overall accumulated for almost 17 years now. Started with SAP very early on, and then joined, as some people say, the dark side, the security side of things, like about 10 years ago. And staying with that combination of SAP and security, with having founded NoMonkey about 4 years ago as an independent, trusted advisor around the topic of SAP security, and providing learnings and trainings to our customers, as well as consulting services. Pretty much to customers all over the world, and happy to share my experience.
Right, thanks, Marco. So for today's topic, we will be talking a bit about S4 transformations and the considerations for security there. So if we think about the general journey for companies busy with the S4 transformation, a lot of that is about companies essentially moving from an on-premise SAP installation, moving to the cloud with Rise, for instance, but also moving a lot of their SAP functionality to cloud applications like Ariba or SuccessFactors or even other cloud applications. So widening that attack surface from a security perspective. Marco, if I can just ask you, for companies now in that process of moving or considering the move, from your experience, do you see as the common mistakes people make in this process of the S4 transformation?
I think you can very much summarize it by those organizations, or at least some of them, or not to the necessary extent, not making security and compliance part of a fundamental strategic decision, because they still consider them as technology topics only, or let's put it that way, as topics that can be solved solely by technology. So that's like really, I think the root cause that still many board members, and for example, as we know, SAP ERP solutions are quite often, very closely connected to the business, also in the sense of that the member of the board is, for example, the CFO in the organization, because traditionally SAP has been used for finance and things like that. And, still working in this mental model that cybersecurity and security topics around of SAP are technology topics only. And very often in combination, that comes with a lack of a corporate security strategy, so that at the start of the transformation, the business does not yet have ever thought about, like, for example, modeling threats and risks related to the use of digital technology such as SAP. And so, like, there is then typically no corporate security strategy available to address this. This is specifically the case for mid-sized companies, while larger companies typically do have also by the reasons of being highly regulated or having to provide certain certifications, they do have typically this corporate security strategy. However, what you then often face is that it's not being breaking down to the S4HANA transformation project. You already mentioned that very often, as part of an S4HANA transformation, for many organizations, it's the very first step to make towards the cloud, towards utilizing cloud infrastructure to a larger extent. And that's of course quite often also a very heavy lift the S/4HANA transformation project needs to do when it comes to first of all, understanding and creating the ability to govern the use of cloud services, of cloud technologies, and being able to assess the due diligence of different cloud service providers, right? So that's quite often then, because of the complexity, kind of a little bit neglected, because like it also creates a project risk, so to say. And then it's very often then understood at the end of the project, when there has been quite a couple of time and effort going into a specific direction, and moving back is not always easy, and never is it cheap, right?
Yeah, you brought up a very important point there. Security, such a broad and complex topic, but it also seems to kind of be the neglected part of all projects. And that's where you also, raised the comment there about, talking to the business. But a lot of that is education, just for them to understand, first of all, the impact of basically the decisions that they are making. That basically for every decision they make, there could be an impact on security as well. So a lot of that has to do with the education. So talking about a bit more then on the cloud infrastructure and moving to lots of cloud applications, that widening of the attack surface. Can you maybe list a couple of items there just to consider when you move a lot of that applications or infrastructure to the cloud?
Yeah. So like the vast majority of all SAP customers are not making the transformation just by themselves. So like there's even like for small to mid-sized transformation project, as you would consider, there's quite often a huge number of providers, service providers, suppliers, and so on, who are involved in that transformation project. And it really makes sense also by the access these providers and their personal need throughout the project, that when you make a decision with whom you want to go and you select these providers, that you have a look about their security practice and and if they're actually showing proper due diligence, because like otherwise you will have a very open backdoor throughout the whole transformation, right? And we already know these kind of things, such as with, starting with SolarWinds, continuing with what we see with Okta right now, and so on. These kind of providers, they have access to your assets, and you have to trust them to a certain degree that they can do their job. And so it's very crucial with actually whom you want to go into bed, right? Also, it is very important from my point of view that you take into account the security implications of the transformation approach that you have selected. It makes a significant difference if you go brownfield or greenfield, in terms of what kind of security activities at what point in the transformation project you need to conduct in addition. So to summarize it, with brownfield, while it's typically the easier approach to the transformation, you have to do more security cleanups depending on where you're coming from with your EC2 or business suite. While with greenfield, you do have some advantage that you're getting the typically better secure by default settings and setups from SAP. Out of the box when you go that way, like both is possible to get to the same security level, but you have to take it into account. Another very important thing is make proper network and application level access management throughout the whole project. Like no excuses, especially when you're thinking about a cloud approach. you have to change your mental model that there will be always a second security layer, because there is not anymore. There are no firewalls anymore, and like no physical boundaries towards like your own data center or your hosted data center or whatsoever. Like everything becomes access management, and everything becomes an entity with its credentials, key materials, and so on. Which also means when you are phasing out different suppliers throughout the project, at the end of the project, or even like during the project, you have to be able to rotate key material and credentials, right? So like the one thing with the service account that has been created for like whatever integration purpose of data and so on by a supplier, like the supplier knows the credentials because he created the account. And then, it might be directly and still being exposed on the internet as an access to your environment. And another very important topic, include upskilling your security and your SAP team about these specific traits of S/4HANA and all of the things around. Because like for the vast majority of organizations, it is not only, replacing the ERP system with going from ECC to S/4HANA, but you're getting, with a very high likelihood, you're getting additional cloud services from SAP that you're integrating, like SuccessFactors, Ariba, Concur, whatsoever. You're starting using the business technology platform and so on. And all of these bits and pieces, they have all of their own security traits. And also the way how security requirements can be managed in S/4HANA, they have significantly changed to ECC at some neuralgic points. Just talking about like a very different access control concept compared like with Fiori and how you've been working with traditional access control and a role-based access control model in SAP. And this also incorporates having a security baseline as a project criteria. Quite often I see that an external project manager for an S/4HANA tells me, well, like it's not any of my project criteria to provide like a secure S/4HANA system or S/4HANA environment as part of the project. Like that is nothing I'm being measured against with. And so like when there's no target to it, or when there's no objective given to the project, why should it be followed? And also this includes that throughout the project, the project needs to conduct proper patching of all of the layers from operating system to the application during the project, and having ensured that, for example, there's not a huge load of patching that needs to be done after the go live, with all of the implications that can have to the productive use of the solution. Of course, especially in my role when we conduct penetration tests, security assessments, or reviewing security concepts, do that early in the project, please. So very often we face the situation that 2 weeks before go live, when the user acceptance testing has been completed, we're doing a penetration test. And then everybody is crying around and saying, there's so many findings, there's no chance we're going to fix them before go live. We urgently need a risk acceptance from the management, with a lot of things that could have been avoided from the very beginning on, right? Just by having conducted like even the concept review earlier. And I think that's some of the most important points I want to share with you.
That's great. And you touched on a couple of items, which I'll maybe just kind of reiterate, because there's also a few topics that came up in some of the previous podcasts. And maybe one of the last ones where you mentioned, just the complexity of moving to S4 and moving applications to the cloud. That additional complexity that's been introduced, it's almost that companies don't understand the impact that's going to have on their staff, and the staff is then often prepared for it, and they're underskilled and kind of learning on the job. And if you're aiming to implement good security model and your staff is not adequately skilled up to handle it, you're going to run into those issues later down the line, and hopefully not at the go live time, but it's going to catch up to you somewhere. The other item maybe is just, again, you mentioned the system integrators. There's many of them with many different skill sets, but not everyone has a great focus on security. So we always try and emphasize to our customers, as you would evaluate applications to do what they are intended for, why not get someone that specializes in security to assist you in this part, rather than relying on a system integrator that doesn't specialize in security. Everyone has their strengths, so let them focus on their strengths. So look at someone like NoMonkey to help you out in that. Right. So maybe just moving on then, you already touched on access control, and so that's obviously where our key focus always is also for security. But as we now already mentioned a few times, security is kind of the neglected child, and often, as you also pointed out there, is that some of the system integrators doesn't have security as one of their benchmark items. So what they would do is they would kind of opt for the easy way out and implement like the SAP standard business roles, because that's the quickest way in which they can actually get to a UAT and go live, but without considering the impact on over assignment of access and so the complexities of trying to fix that afterwards is, that's immense, and that's often not considered. Now, apart from access, that we know can have an impact on the go live. I think you also mentioned maybe a penetration testing just prior to a go live. Are there maybe any other items that you can think of that can have an impact on a go live as well?
Mm-hmm. So the results of the penetration test, like I wouldn't say they are not impacting the go live, but what hasn't done properly before the penetration test. The penetration test just makes transparent what has not been done properly beforehand. I kind of touched base on it, that very often at the end of the project, the environment is in a bad patching state, right? And that can have various implications up to that. I have seen that at the end of a S/4HANA transformation project, the system was not in a maintenance state from SAP point of view anymore, because, for example, since 12 months, no security patches have been conducted. So you're going live with a system who is not able to receive security notes anymore, or like where you would be able to get support from SAP, right? So also not necessarily from a cybersecurity, but also from a business continuity perspective, that's a big issue. Continuing with all of the business continuity considerations here, that sizing for the actual productive use of the environment has not been taken into account directly. So things that, like I've seen it actually in both directions, so that in cloud environments, HANA databases are majorly oversized, and there's like way too much spending than on the cloud bill for this wrong sizing, but also like the other way around, especially when for example, when there have been contracts where the service provider was responsible for the cloud bill during the transformation. So then like things are highly or very tightly sized. And then, however, like there is no knowledge or no skill available in the organization then to adjust the sizing accordingly. So that's another thing. You don't want your S/4HANA system second day after go live, not being available anymore because of these kind of issues, right? They seem to be very easy or obvious, but it happens all the time. The standard business rules, I also see that very frequent. It basically always comes back to like that there have been criterias and requirements for the actual transformation project for these security considerations like missing, or the customer have not been able to govern on them and assess them properly, right? What I often see missing is actually conducting a proper cleanup at the end of the project with, the different kind of access that only for project reason has been there. It's still being provided. Also that, for example, different custom implemented solutions, or also like third-party add-ons that only throughout the project has been required, are not being decommissioned. Different tools around of the S/4HANA system for that purpose are not being decommissioned, and so on. And these are all actually an increased attack surface without any value for the business, right? So these cleanup activities, they're also like a very common thing that we see are not being properly conducted.
Maybe just to end off on that topic, but we see also then focusing on, from an access perspective, especially with all of the new things like Fiori being introduced and the cloud applications, is that a lot of companies would argue, well, they don't have the visibility because either the GRC application isn't connected to those systems yet, or they don't have a rule set available to analyze it. So they kind of go in with a blindfold, or they're just happy to go live, and then trying to fix that afterwards. You said, that cleanup, it either doesn't take place or it will become a big next project. So maybe then almost to end off as a summary of what we've discussed, Marco, we are aware that there are so many companies that still need to go through their S4 transformation, and it's been quite topical about just how many companies might not make that 2027 deadline, and there's also a 2025 deadline. But if you were to give some advice to the companies that are considering that S4 transformation, what would be kind of the key pointers you would give them at this stage?
Yeah. From my point of view, it is only getting more difficult at this point in time, the longer you continue waiting, starting the transformation project. First of all, in the meanwhile, and it wasn't from the beginning, in the meanwhile, the technology parts of an S/4HANA transformation, they are generally being solved already a couple of times, different kind of customers, different kind of transformation approaches, and so on. So in the meanwhile, it can be from the experience of others who already have done the transformation. There are a lot of learnings available about the possible technology pitfalls and how to avoid them. And also the product S/4HANA has matured over the time, as well as, the different integration scenarios that typically come with it. So that should not be a major showstopper anymore. You are already not the first mover anymore. Why do I say it's getting more difficult? This is because with the yet still number of customers that has to do the transformation, there is the resources for organizations with proper due diligence is already very sparse to help you throughout the transformation. Neither Citerion nor Monkey will be able to help all of you when you are standing on the door at the beginning of 2026 or 2027. There is no way, specifically if you're taking as a learning from the podcast that you have to have different providers with different skill sets within your transformation project to avoid this conflict of interest that you have mentioned, Emile, so that just one party does it all, and of course then neglecting things that are somewhat critical to the actual project delivery or whatsoever, such as security. So if you see value in having some devil's advocates within your project, so taking care and helping you govern the work of the others, then you really should consider starting very early, as well as it's already foreseeable that it will be difficult to find these resources. Very early on, upskilling your own workforce to be able to subsidize and being able to take over some of these parts, and leveraging their due diligence as part of increasing the security maturity of your S/4HANA transformation, but also the overall maturity.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks, Marco. I think that's a great summary. You said start early, make sure you're well prepared, and especially for us that has a security focus, from our perspective, always get someone that you trust or a trusted advisor in that space to advise you from day one. Bringing in someone at the end, that's not going to work. So thank you very much, Marco, for your time today. And we hope everyone found it insightful. And if there are questions, feel free to reach out to Marco or myself.
Thank you, Emile. Pleasure was all mine. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.